All right, this is Pastor Jim Miller of Real Life Church here again, talking about the world we live in and how best to deal with it as Christian adults and people who are struggling with this new season that we were completely unprepared for, I'd say. And I'm here today with Eric Weaver, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist, has a counseling practice here in the town I live in, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about how to deal with stress in this season. So, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. This has been a great series.
Yeah, appreciate it. This is part of our Homeschool for the Soul series, where we've talked to a lot of different people about a lot of different things. And you're helping us with kind of the practical questions today, because you're on the ground counseling people who are in the midst of a crisis and depression and anxiety and all those kinds of things. And so what's that like? I mean, how do you begin to address this new context?
Yeah, it's been really tough, as this has really kind of spread out and been prolonged, and the stay-at-home order has really kind of stretched into lengths that maybe people weren't expecting. There's been a huge increase in exhaustion, in anxiety, and really feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah. And you said,
So
when we talked before, you said something interesting. You said, while there might be commonalities to the way people approach stress, we're all kind of our own person, and so
right.
There's not a remedy for everybody.
That's right. And so there is a lot of commonalities in that we all have our mind and our body and our emotions and our spirit, but really there's quite a bit of differences in how we experience life, and we have different nervous systems. Mm-hmm. We have different personalities, different sensitivities, and we also have different histories. And so when we come into a season where there is stress, or where there is challenges, or where there is a lot of difficulty, we're going to experience that differently. And it can be really a trap to be looking kind of over the fence and seeing, how are other people dealing with this, and where am I in context to them?
Yeah.
Maybe even within our own families. People are going to experience this in very different ways.
Yeah, that's good. So talk to me about that. Let's say I'm in the middle of crisis. I'm looking at my own life and thinking I'm a total mess. And part of my anxiety is I feel like I'm worse than everybody else. I wonder if everybody else has it more together than I do. And so, as a counselor, that kind of factors into an embarrassment to share with anybody what's going on, for fear that I'll look bad. So what do you do about that? What do you do about the fact that you're not sure what everybody else is going through and you have concerns of your own?
Yeah, I think one of the first things is to really not try and compare ourselves to other people, to really honor the fact that we are uniquely created and different. And so our experiences are valid. And when we really do that comparing, what ends up happening is we disconnect from ourselves. We may end up minimizing, dismissing. And when we do that within our own thoughts and our own feelings, we can really get into a place of being very flooded very quickly, and go into a state of crisis.
Right.
Yeah.
And flooded is kind of a good metaphor for you in this.
It is.
You've used
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got a good memory.
I like the way you described it. So describe it for everybody else.
Sure. So working with clients, I've found that images and metaphors can be just really, really helpful to help connect them to things that maybe are disconnected, don't totally make sense, and can provide a frame for them to understand where they are. And so one of the metaphors that I really enjoy using is I see all of us carrying a bucket in life, and life tends to pour into our bucket. And then sometimes the proverbial fire hose opens up. And the thing about our bucket is that there's a spigot at the bottom. And if we're not turning that spigot, and if we're not processing through all of the things that we're absorbing, then that bucket is going to fill up. It's going to get really heavy. And if we carry it for too long alone, we're going to get exhausted, and then it's going to overflow. And when it overflows, that really tends to show up in the form of anxiety and depression.
Right.
And so I really encourage people to be very mindful about their bucket, what they're absorbing, and most importantly, how to process
Right.
what they're holding.
Okay, so that's us. We've got these heavy buckets that we're carrying around right now.
Right. And particularly you and I.
Yeah,
in our profession. We tend to really hold a lot with people. That's right.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do we do? I mean, how do we weather this?
So I think one of the first things is it's a really important distinction. We need to be able to identify what is our soothing coping skills, and then what is our processing coping skills. And so a soothing coping skill for me would be I really enjoy, and it helps to really kind of calm and de-stress me, listening to music.
Okay.
I like going for a drive. I like to sit around a bonfire.
Yeah.
Other people may enjoy reading a book or watching a movie or their favorite TV show. So these are really soothing coping tools. They're not necessarily going into the things that are painful and processing them, but it really does kind of bring those levels down. Yeah. So we want to be mindful as to what are those things that help soothe us, and be very intentional, particularly during this time, yeah. To engage them regularly. So now, on the other, go ahead.
I was going to say, so, history is our friend here, because we got some background by which to say, I know what actually calms you down. Go ahead.
Yes, exactly. So on the other side of that, we have processing. And processing what we're holding is really what I'm talking about when I say we need to be very mindful about that spigot and turning it. And so how are we processing the multiple facets of our being? I mean, God has created us integrated. So we have our thoughts, we have our feelings, we have our body, and we have our spirit. And so when we experience stressful, painful, challenging, overwhelming things in our bucket, so to speak, we're going to be experiencing them in all facets of our being. And so we need to be very intentional about how we process. So a lot of times what I do when I work with clients is to bring their attention to these 4 facets and to really engage in the activities that lean into the difficult area. And so with our thoughts and our feelings, how are we letting those out? Who are we talking to in a way that allows us to express those thoughts, connect with those emotions, not feel alone? Journaling can be really, really helpful. Being able to write, and to be able to write in a manner that is just where you are in that moment. What are you experiencing, and what are the thoughts that go along with it? What are the emotions that you find coming up? And the really important key there, Jim, is that it's such an important piece that you don't get to judge what comes out. You don't get to call it right or wrong. You really shouldn't call it good or bad. It's simply where you are. Yeah. And that's the point, is that we want to have you connected to your sense of what you're holding. Other ways to process your thoughts and feelings might be in creative outlets. So painting, right? But thinking about and connecting to what's difficult or what you're going through in painting or drawing, writing songs, writing poetry, things like that. So then kind of moving into the next facet, our body, really paying attention to how our body is absorbing what we're going through.
My body's absorbing primarily Cheetos and Dr. Pepper.
I understand. And we talked last night, and for me, it's a pepperoni pizza. And so our bodies are also going to be experiencing, when we go through really difficult and really heavy emotions and challenging circumstances, that gets stored in our muscles in the form of the stress hormone cortisol. And that's going to build up in our muscles. And so exercise cannot be stated enough. It is so important that we really activate the system that God has given us naturally to be able to bleed off that cortisol. And so exercising in a bilateral fashion. So what I mean by bilateral is that, we have 2 hemispheres of our brain, our right side and our left side. And what's really neat is that our neuroscience studies are showing that when we activate our body in a bilateral fashion, it calms and soothes those systems in our brain that are really prone and sensitive to stress. So the other part of that is that when we maintain an elevated heart rate, and it doesn't have to be really high, for about 35 to 45 minutes, that releases endorphins that naturally reduces and lowers anxiety and depression. It can clear our brain. And so you really get a 3-4 with one exercise of getting the cortisol, releasing those endorphins, and soothing those hemispheres of our brain.
Huh. That's neat to hear the science behind it.
I kind of love that, and I can kind of geek out, so I'll kind of leave it there.
Good.
And then lastly, our spirit, right? And so when faith, or if faith is a part of your life, how are you coming before the Lord? And I have found that being really intentional with coming with what we're doing with our hands in particular. And so this is really kind of a metaphor again of what we're holding. And so coming before the Lord and maybe being mindful of our posture and turning things over and saying, hey, God, I lay this at your feet. I can't carry this anymore. This is too heavy. And so really being intentional with naming the things that are painful, overwhelming, challenging, and moving our bodies in kind can really help bring us into a place of being connected with God. And then when that's done, turning our hands back over and saying, what would you have for me? Right? And so what would you have to say to me? What would you have to give me in this time? And then another thing is really meditating on God's promises, sitting and taking in who he says he is to us, and really letting that soak in. And but some people can kind of get a little weirded out with meditation, and I don't know how to meditate, and I don't know what meditation really is. And I love that there's this idea that if you know how to worry, you know how to meditate. It's really just kind of recycling the same thought over and over again. And so that's helpful. And then lastly, worship, being able to connect and release and to worship.
Yeah. A lot of people are reading the Psalms in this season because it has both the action of letting go and taking in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, that's quite a range you went through very quickly there. So there's emotional things we can do to honor where we are without looking for blame or guilt, just acknowledging this is where I am right now.
Yeah, right.
There's physical things that we can do, obviously, for exercise, because your body is built to need that and to react well out of that. There's a spiritual habit of prayer and meditation and worship, which help kind of realign our vision for our lives and our hearts.
Right. And then if we want to maybe cover one more area where there is places that just feel really stuck and we feel really powerless, there's a really important process that we can engage in, and that is to be able to identify specifically what it is that's painful, and to be able to honor it, to be able to say, this is real and this is painful, and I have no power over this, right? Not dismissing it, not minimizing it, but really staying present and honoring it. And then maybe moving into the next step of saying, and so what is it about me? What is it that I value within myself that really makes this so painful? So maybe it's, I really value my kids' education, and I really value being an employee, right? And I'm holding both, and I can't change that. And I can't really be a good teacher with my kids and an employee at the same time. It's really kind of impossible. And maybe there's other areas of financial stability and the need there, and where there's that value that we really hold. And being able to acknowledge that as being really a place of where this is also really painful. And then going lastly into this state of, if I can't control the circumstances, not what would I focus on to control, then what would I choose? So if I can't control what I'm going through, if I can't change anything, what would I choose during this time? And being very specific to that open-ended question of choose really allows for there to be a lot of open answers. Like maybe I might choose courage during this time. I might choose transparency. I'm just going to be really honest all the time with where I'm at. I might choose humor, right? I might choose to connect in ways that are challenging for me, even if I can't control my circumstances. And so being able to have that sense of that locus of control coming out of our circumstances and into our being can also really shift things.
Hmm. Okay. Let me ask you a last question, because I think there are a lot of people kind of on this edge out there. At what point should people reach out for professional help?
Well, I think the first starting place is if you're contemplating, gosh, I wonder if I should reach out, you probably should.
Hmm.
I think that's a good place to be. So people really tend to get in trouble when they hold it for too long by themselves. And if that is starting to be experienced and questioned, then that might be a really good indicator. You might want to pay attention to that and say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be kind to myself, and I'm not going to be alone in this. So I would start there. And then I would also say, if you're really starting to see some impairments to just your daily functioning, so really pay attention to your sleep patterns, pay attention to your appetite, really watch where your thoughts are going. Are you starting to have suicidal thoughts? And where are your emotions? Are you starting to get hopeless? So those would be very important things to be connected to, aware of, and those would be strong indicators. Yeah, it's time. Go ahead and reach out. And then lastly, how are you using substances? How are you using alcohol? How are you using medication or maybe other drugs? And is it becoming concerning for you, or is it being maybe observed by somebody who cares for you and that they're concerned for you? And those would be probably moments I would say be important to reach out.
That's helpful. I appreciate that.
Yeah, good.
I choose to be in good conversations like this.
Oh, me too. Thanks for having me.
Good for my soul. Thank you so much for informing us. And I realize we can only do so much in a little video, but that's a good open door for people to begin to contemplate their own situation and size it up and assess what they need to do next in order to stay healthy in the season.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm glad that was helpful.
Yeah, appreciate it. Well, thanks so much, Eric. I appreciate you tuning in. And everybody can continue to watch videos like this on Homeschool for the Soul. We'll keep updating them daily and hope this is helpful for you and blesses your soul. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.